Thank you so much for coming to the session after lunch. We have a good one here with Integrated Mobility Division and Complete Streets implementation updates. Just as a reminder, PDH sign-in form is up front. If you missed it coming in, just you can sign in as you leave. We have an hour for this session, and with that, I'll hand it off to Ryan Brumfield, Director of Integrated Mobility Section.
Okay, good afternoon. All right, so I'm Ryan Brumfield. I'm the Director of the Integrated Mobility Division at NCDOT, and actually going to start with a few updates and an overview of our division, so you have that background. Then we'll talk about Complete Streets, the methodology, the tools that we're using to evaluate projects, provide some updates on some new guidance that we're developing, hope to release soon, and then we have a specific project example that Tim and Lauren are going to talk about based on their experience as project managers. So just a brief overview of our division. So we used to be two separate divisions, the Bike and Ped and Public Transit divisions, merged in 2019. We still have the core functions of those two divisions, which includes providing funding to 98 transit agencies in the state, over 3 dozen nonprofits to provide transportation for elderly and disabled clients. And for the Bike and Ped side, we manage the Complete Streets program. We have the Safe Routes to School program. We have some involvement in the TAP program through Federal Highways as well. So those core functions are still there, and we also have new focus areas around innovations and data and getting more engaged in multimodal planning. North Carolina is unique, actually, in that we have 100% coverage across the state for public transportation. Every county in the state has a public transportation provider. So we are unique. You know, everyone knows that we're the second most rural state in the country behind Texas as far as rural population. So that, given that challenge and how spread out a lot of our state is, it's really great that we have this foundation of public transit statewide. You can see here the different types of systems that we have. We have some multi-county systems, regional community systems, consolidated systems that are consolidated between cities and counties. But again, that key piece that we have statewide coverage is very important to how we're able to succeed with providing public transit services across the state. We also have a growing multimodal network, and we have a really good backbone with our rail service across the state, with the ferry system being one of the top ferry systems in the country, and we have an intercity bus program that connects people to different regions of the state. Our division actually funds a lot of the intercity bus routes that are used across the state, like the Greyhound services. The Greyhound services that are profitable are considered unsubsidized routes. We provide subsidies for the routes that are not profitable to help people connect to rural regions of the state. So again, we have this backbone of service that connects regions, and we have statewide coverage of public transit. We also have a growing network of on-demand microtransit services. Hopefully you are familiar with this service model, but most of the rural counties in the state have what's called demand response transit, which is pre-scheduled 1 to 2 days in advance. We're seeing growing interest in on-demand, which is scheduled, and usually the ride is there within an hour, in some cases as soon as 15 minutes, some of the models we have. So this is more like a T&C model, but subsidized to provide shared rides as public transportation. So this is growing, and I think in 5 to 10 years you'll see most of the state has some type of on-demand service available. We also have a growing network of trails, and really excited this year to celebrate Year of the Trail. Hopefully everyone's familiar with that, but Year of the Trail is really an opportunity to focus on our trails in the state and how our trails connect people to other transportation modes and options in their community. But even with those, with the network of transit and with bike ped facilities across the state, we still have many challenges that we're working to address. And one of those is vehicle deficiency in zero vehicle households. We know that over 1 million individuals in our state live in a household either without a car or have limited access to a car. And far more people than that may have challenges using a car on a regular basis. And so just imagine in your community being without a car, how much more challenging it would be to get to the places you need to be. So part of our division's focus is helping ensure that everyone has equal access to opportunities regardless if they have a vehicle or not. We also know that North Carolinians want multimodal options. You can see here the results from the NC Moves 2050 survey. When asked about the future of transportation, the importance of traveling by car in the future decreases by 51%, according to our survey respondents. And when asked what should be the focus of transportation in your region for the future, overwhelmingly, multimodal connectivity was the number one response, as you can see here. So a lot of interest in having more multimodal options across the state. We know that our population is changing. Our 1 in 5 individuals by 2030 will be over 65 years old, and the 85-plus population group will increase by 116% by 2040. So we need to make sure that folks can age in place safely and have multimodal options as they age in place. And we also know that vulnerable road user fatalities and injuries are increasing. As you can see here, this is an alarming trend the last several years. We need to make sure we're designing our facilities and planning our facilities to safely accommodate all road users. So understanding those challenges and problems, our core goals in IMD are to increase access, to eliminate barriers and ensure everyone has equal access to opportunities and services, enhance quality of life by providing those multimodal choices, and ensuring safety regardless of the mode someone's using to get to their destination. We don't have a vision statement, but more so a vision of what we think transportation should look like if we're successful in achieving our goals. So if we succeed in those core goals and addressing those problems, transportation, we think the system looks like no barriers and unmet needs are minimized, equal access to opportunities and services for all, multimodal options rival driving in terms of time, convenience, and cost, and we have zero transportation-related fatalities, injuries, and greenhouse gas emissions. So this is the sort of rose-colored view of what we think transportation system can look like and should look like if we're successful in the future at achieving our goals. And we think of this sort of ecosystem of mobility that can help us produce those outcomes in that vision. And there's 4 key pillars that we are working on in IMD. First of all is having layers of multimodal services at the local level to connect you to places nearby, interlocal level to connect you to places across the community. This could be the microtransit service I mentioned or a local fixed route bus system. Regional services to connect you to other communities. This can be BRT and ferry and passenger rail and many other services that we already have, and interregional to connect you to other regions. So those layers of multimodal services at the local, interlocal, regional, and interregional are critical, and we hope in the future they're accessible, autonomous, electric, connected, and shared. And so that's one key pillar that we're working towards. Connected at mobility hubs being a physical location where different modes and services come together. And in many communities, these could also serve as activity centers for events and other activities in the community. Connected by complete streets so that we can get to those mobility hubs safely and all road users are safely accommodated. And then integrated by mobility as a service. So imagine one day going from Murphy to Manteo on one single digital ticket across services, across jurisdictions, seamlessly, as easy as that would be for me to get in my car and drive to Murphy right now. Think about that as the future of how we help people navigate a complex system of different services in different counties. Mobility as a service is the way that we get there with single ticketing across multiple platforms and services. So those 4 pillars collectively, we think, if we focus on those, can help us move towards that vision where everyone has equal access to opportunities. Our structure here at IMD, we have 4 key branches. We have a planning and programming branch that includes a regional planning team with planners that cover each region of the state and a statewide planning team that works on statewide plans. Our finance and administration division, our branch, is administering our grants with our subrecipients and processing invoices and processing our grant programs. Compliance and procurement makes sure that those subrecipients receiving federal funding through us are meeting federal requirements. And program and project management is our new branch that we recently formed. We combined our innovations and data team with our new focus areas around project management and project development. Complete Streets is now housed in this new branch. Brennan Fuqua is with us. He's our lead for this branch. We're excited to have this growing focus in our division on project development and project management, and we think this will make us a better asset to the department and to our partners in helping move projects forward on the multimodal side. So again, we have a lot of work going on in safety for bicyclists and pedestrians, and especially those connections to transit. We released the Complete Streets implementation guidance last year, and we'll talk in more detail, Joe will, about the standards that are included in that guidance. Over the past year, we've awarded over 40,000 bike helmets to over 300 organizations across the state. A lot of them use those and host events in their community to educate the public about safe walking and biking practices near schools. We recently awarded new Safe Routes to School projects to communities across the state. We have worked with communities across the state to apply for USDOT discretionary grants and have been successful with at least 2 raised grants in the last 2 rounds for Complete Streets projects in High Point and Rutherford County. And we also are piloting some low-cost pedestrian safety treatments in communities across the state as well, and looking at the results of those. Looking ahead, we just released this, so it's looking back because we just released it 2 weeks ago, but the Bicycling Best Practices Guide for motorists and bicyclists, best practices for traveling safely. We will be working to, again, be more engaged in the TAP program, a federal highway program for bicycle and pedestrian improvements, and look into pilot flexing funding to FTA for sidewalks at connected transit facilities. And then, as Joe will speak about, we are working on updates to the Complete Streets guidance that we hope to release later this year around complete streets on resurfacing and maintenance projects, and then also providing more guidance to designers and project managers on flexibility when you have constraints as you're designing projects, what the trade-offs may be, and how you can make the right decision for your project. With that, actually, I do have the next 2, right, Joe? This is just a brief history. I think most of you know this. We have had a bicycle program. Actually, we were the first state in the country to have a bicycle program in 1974. We adopted the Complete Streets policy initially in 2009, so we've had it for a while, and you probably have been, recognized that when it was first introduced, it wasn't fully implemented initially. There have been issues since that initial adoption on implementing the policy. 2019, the policy was strengthened to require every project in the state to be evaluated for Complete Streets needs. And then, again, last year is when we released the updated guidance that has the standard methodology for evaluating projects, which Joe is going to cover. But really, I think the new guidance updates from last year are rooted in how do we identify transportation needs and choose the right facility type to address those needs. So we think of a transportation need essentially as observed or anticipated demand to walk or bike on facilities to key destinations. And you can see here photos. We have these across the state. There's evidence across the state with the goat paths and with seeing people using the roadway when they should be using a safer facility. So really, again, this is a key tenet of our methodology and standards, is that we are understanding what the transportation needs are, and we are choosing facility types to help address those needs. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Joe, and he's going to go into the methodology.
All right. Good afternoon. As Ryan said, I'm Joe Furstenberg. I know a few faces, but plenty of names, just because of the nature of how we've worked the last few years. If you do know me or have worked with me, you may have noticed that my title has changed because I have, with Complete Streets, moved over into the new program and project management branch with IMD. So just an update there. So I want to walk through the evaluation methodology, like Ryan said, that we deployed last year in February of 2022 and have been using since, still using it right now. Going to walk through sort of the process and the steps that we use, and then, like I said, we're going to turn it over and show an illustration of a project that's gone through this process. Let's see. There we go. So I want to start out thinking that if you're not a project manager in the room, you'll pretend you're a project manager in the room. So how do you submit your review to IMD to look at? So we have developed, and part of a lot of the early work that we did is we needed to streamline and standardize the process for Complete Streets reviews overall. So what we did is we developed this form page. It's hosted through Smartsheets. It's available on the NCDOT Complete Streets Connect site as well. And that form page, which I guess I could just show you, this is a sort of an image of what that's going to look like when you go there. And so we basically have developed this around the NCDOT PDN, Project Delivery Network, and there is options for a Stage 1 review, which I'm sorry, you can't really see that, but they're there. There's options for a Stage 1 review, Stage 2, Stage 3, and then general technical assistance. So obviously that's following, pretty strictly the PDN, so, geared towards highway projects, but like Ryan said, we review all projects, so we'll get projects submitted as general technical assistance that can be safety projects, maintenance projects, things like that. So, just to say that we're always there to help and can help weigh in on complete streets issues. So this is a graphic of the process that starts when you use that form page and initiate a complete streets review with IMD. So it's a 5-step evaluation methodology. It moves and lives through the PDN steps as well, moving from Stage 1 to Stage 2 and further. You can see we start, over here. Step 1 is sort of our initial screening and data input. I'll go into more details on each of the steps in just a second, but, really we're gathering our information. We're sort of early in the project schedule. Sometimes we have more information than others, just depending on the project type. So pulling all that existing information together, planned, existing, what's out on the roadway now, all that sort of stuff. Then we'll move into transportation need and work through that determination. I'll show you some of the tools that we've developed to get to that point to be able to estimate activity. Then we'll move to that facility selection. So this is usually around Step 3 is where we kind of hit the limits at a Stage 1 review, mainly because the project needs more data to build off of to make more specific decisions about the multimodal facilities and how they may need to be maneuvered through a project area. So once we'll get past that, and the project, usually what happens is they'll resubmit at Stage 2, and we'll initiate a review of the first 3 stages, and then we'll go to Stage 4. We'll look at the impacts. We've got, hopefully at this time we've got a lot more of that environmental information, and we know if there's, historical constraints, things like that along the project area. So this is when we assess for those, and then we make recommendations on how to address that with the multimodal facilities in the project, and then we'll go to Step 5. But as you see there, we sort of have the loop built into our graphic there, just to say that as we are looking at those impacts, and as we're moving to final analysis where we're really, sort of saying this is our recommendation, this is what the project is going to provide multimodally, we're going to take a look and, we're going to see if cost and schedule impacts are an issue. Do we need to go back and assess an alternative facility types or your next best facility type for a project and different elements like that. So this is really a more in-depth overview of the process steps and what's happening at each of those 5 steps. So again, Step 1, the initial screening and data input. Like I said, we're pulling together all the information from CTPs, other locally adopted plans. We're working we will perform a network connectivity analysis to the project area. So you can see there we go a half mile for pedestrian and 3 miles out for bicycle facilities, looking for those connections, looking for facilities that maybe there's a sidewalk that's only along a certain number of parcels that we need to connect to that this project touches, things like that. And then we also look, and as I sort of teased before, we'll look and see, does this project review need an alternative review type? So, we don't look at maintenance projects the same way we look at new construction highway projects because, there's obvious constraints there and different funding sources and, just different implications for how we review for complete streets. The second step in this process, as I mentioned, is the transportation need determination. So this is one of the tools. I wonder if I can get this to play. Maybe. Yeah, there we go. So you can see this will kind of walk through the steps of what this tool is and does. So it's online. It is also available. It's on the Complete Streets Connect page, so you could go there and check it out. What we did, pulled together at the census block group level. Right now, there's 3 different factors that are equally weighted in there and produce a score. And those scores fall into a category of none, intermittent, low, medium, and high. And you can see that the census block groups are, different. They're color-coded by what level that they get a score from. So we use this to give an assumption of what we have. We know that we don't have, very good multimodal counts data across the state. We're working on that. We're building that up. But until we have, more official data like that, this is what we use to, like I said, estimate that activity. And just a note here that the intermittent and non-demand areas, which you'll see on the larger statewide map for the activity estimation, we still look at those areas. That doesn't mean, because they fall into intermittent none, that doesn't mean that we don't look at them and review them. We're still going to look. There's a lot of things that we have limitations with our data, so we want to make sure and confirm that that is what we're seeing out there. All right. There we go. So using data, so as I mentioned, so it's a 4-tier classification based on the census block groups. You can kind of see better, well, maybe, the coloration of the different score levels that come into there. As I mentioned, so housing, jobs, and zero vehicle households are what's in there right now. But in terms of updates and what we're working on right now is incorporating in intersection densities. So that's a really good, so far it's been a really good indication of activity, multimodal activity in particular in a project area. And so we're working right now to implement that, and that will probably be in our first update that we do later this year. So this is a look at what the state looks like from the activity estimation viewpoint. So, as Ryan mentioned, one of the second most rural state, you can see that there's a lot of light colors across the state. So we have a lot of the non-intermittent areas across the state. So, it doesn't mean that those areas don't get multimodal facilities. It just means you're looking at things more like paved shoulders, different shared use paths in a more rural area. It's more like a greenway, things like that. So step 3 is facility type selection. So this is where we use all the information that we've collected. We use the activity estimation. We're going to coordinate with the project team and the LGA on the project and the MPO RPO staff to confirm the information that we've got and the activity levels. And then we're going to use that information and make a facility type selection. In your stage 1 reviews, it's going to be pretty broad. As you get further along in project development, your facility type selection is going to get more defined. We'll start looking at intersections and making recommendations on how to navigate multimodal facilities in an intersection. So this is, again, we're sort of going back, collecting, making sure that we've got new data that may have been collected by the project and applying that. And this is another tool that we developed for this step in particular is this facility selection matrix, which is available also online on all of this actually is available online on the Connect page. But you can see just a basic explanation of this. We use that demand estimation score and correlate that with ADT and speed, and you fall into a bucket of a preferred and an alternative facility type. High level, general, doesn't mean that's going to be the final facility type that goes out there, especially if you're at stage 1. But this is our starting point for knowing what we need to think about, and especially considering if it's going to be a separated facility versus a non-separated facility. You can know pretty quickly that if you've got more than 4 lanes and you're going 55 miles per hour, so you're most likely looking at a separated facility. So step 4 is impact assessment. Like I said, we're going to be looking more in detail at multimodal facilities. We're going to be looking at ways to mitigate for any changes in design or design alternatives that we need to incorporate into the multimodal facilities for a project. We're also going to be looking at the utility impacts, any design and construction impacts for the project and the facilities that are included. Looking at schedule at a high level and also evaluating for environmental risk. So moving into final analysis. So again, this is really the collection of all of those steps and the confirmation of all of those steps. At the project manager level, we're going to be coordinating with them and the locality on maintenance agreements. If there's any cost sharing or betterment, a lot of that is getting documented and included at this step. And as I mentioned, we do keep our receipts on all of those steps. So the product that comes out of this, what you get after you submit a review to IMD, is the Complete Streets Review Assessment Form. It's a several-page document that I didn't want to put on all the slides, but it does follow 1 through 5, all of the steps. So we document each component of those steps and put it in there. This lives with the project. It goes, when we're done with the review, it stays with the project files and moves forward there. So another aspect of using the Smart Sheets tool to collect and standardize and streamline the Complete Streets review process, one of the beauties of that is that we were able to develop a dashboard that is a tracker for projects once they are submitted. So project managers can go in, it's by division, you can see at what stage of review your project is in. So the green is recently submitted, yellow is review in progress, and then comments being addressed is purple. Basically what that means is new is it's been submitted, it hasn't been assigned to staff. Yellow is it's assigned to staff, they're working on it right now. And purple is staff has sent it to me to check off and sign off on before we send it back out. And we do strive for a 3-week turnaround. Obviously, that varies in terms of people being on vacation next week and then the amount of project reviews that get submitted. So this is just another sort of snapshot of that dashboard. You can see it's by division. The sort of pie chart down here is all the 14 divisions and the amount of projects that they've submitted. This isn't from today, so it may be a little different when you look at it right now. But just to give you a sense of all the projects that are in here and that we are trying to be transparent about that, report that out, have that shareable. And so the project manager in particular can go and see at what stage their review is in. And if they, which happens from time to time, if they need it a little sooner than 3 weeks, then we can be flexible on that and address that case by case. But and then so I didn't have it on here, but we did last year in its first year, starting in February, we reviewed over 500 individual project requests. So it's been working good so far. So like Ryan said, we've got some new things coming down the pipeline in terms of complete streets updates and implementation updates. So like I mentioned, we had this guidance out last year, 500 project reviews. I forget what it is right now. We've probably done close to 200 at this point, just from the beginning of this year. We also, last year, we had several work groups that met to develop and make recommendations for some of these long sort of standing issues that we have in the implementation process, things that we can't just change, that require other parties, external parties to change. So we're working on, like Ryan said, some design flexibility guidance for how to address for those impacts and decisions, and sort of how you should go about thinking through decision making for flexibility and multimodal facility design, as well as working on maintenance projects. We're working with our maintenance folks, both in the divisions and at OPM, and working on an analysis of the HMIP. The hope there is that it's not creating a new step or a new process, but we're just flagging those projects that have opportunities for complete streets in the HMIP documents, really looking at the 3 and the 5 year documents, not so much the 1 year document, because we need to have that extra time to have those early conversations with municipalities on maintenance projects and additional elements that they may want to include in those projects. So lots of things that are sort of coming down the pipeline. We're going to update the estimation map, add in that intersection density as well, and continue this process. So it's been, like I said, it's been successful so far. We've had a lot of really good feedback from project managers and division staff on the process and sort of the product that gets delivered after the review. So now we want to highlight that. So I'm going to bring up Lauren and Tim, and they're going to talk through a project that has gone through this process and sort of the implications for that. So Lauren and Tim, turn to you.
All right. Thanks, Joe. I'm Lauren Trebert with VHB. I'm here to give you guys just an overview from the practitioner's side of how this was incorporated into a project in Division 5. And Joe gave you the background on what happens once we send it off to them. But what we want to do is show you when that comes in and the benefits that we saw from the larger project management standpoint. So the project we're highlighting is HL0006. So this is US 401 in Fuquay. And so it's just north of Fuquay as you're coming out of Raleigh. So the project here was to reconfigure intersections into some RCI design. It's already a 4-lane roadway, so we weren't necessarily widening, but we were looking at the intersection-specific locations and improving those because there were operational deficiencies. And we wanted to reduce congestion in the area. So there's your purpose and need, which most of you are probably familiar with, but there's nothing in there about pedestrians or complete streets or even safety or anything like that. So this example really highlights where even if it's not, the purpose of the project is to provide that connectivity or that multimodal access, it should still be included as part of the initial thoughts and what's going into the project from the onset. Okay, so We had a couple of design alternatives going into the project. This was a stage 2 submittal. So this was the alignment is defined, and so we were getting feedback on that. We had two options, one being a shoulder section with a depressed median, and one being a curb and gutter with a raised median, and then the RCIs at the intersections, like I mentioned before. So our first alternative here is the raised median. You can see we've already incorporated sidewalk on one side, a wider mixed-use path on the other, so no on-road facilities here. And then the other option being the shoulder section, which just is going to put those facilities, bike and mixed-use path, further outside the berm as opposed to just beyond the curb and gutter. Okay, so as part of what we did on the project development side was to think about the mobility considerations in the area, looking at land use. It's a mix of residential, agricultural, commercial, so lots of different users of the area. But there were some locations that are going to draw your walkers and your bikers, shopping centers, the church, and things like that. But there was clearly a disjointed existing facility, so some sidewalks, some nothing. We did a review of existing plans, including the Fuquay-Varina pedestrian master plan, their CTP, the Wake County plan, and then also the Campos CTP, which that one recommended an on-road bike corridor along 401, which is the main roadway in the project. So to drill down a little bit on the Fuquay-Varina PED plan, you can see here the zoom in on the project area, the red and white dash, they recommended a proposed sidewalk or side path. So this is just to let you guys know there's plans that we reference as kind of the general project managers, and we then submitted to IMD just like we would for any other review within DOT, as whether it's a geotech review, whether it's your historic architecture and archaeology review, things like that. We just, as part of the process, submitted to IMD through that Complete Streets portal. And what came from that was somewhat of a verification of things that we already knew, but then it was supplemented significantly with all of the information and processes that Joe just talked about, justifying the needs, justifying the type of designs that we were going to go forward with. So again, the study area has been identified in plans as needing the ped and bike accommodations. It is a relatively higher speed facility, so there are special considerations for that. And then ultimately, they weighed in on the design between the two different alternatives and came back recommending alternative one from a corridor perspective. So the 4-lane raised median with curb and gutter. So the recommendation from IMD lined up with what we had originally thought, but there was a lot of other things that come out of this from a design perspective, specifically with alternative intersections, the RCIs, and setting the project up for success when it comes to those intersection designs as well. So that was kind of the project development side. I'm going to hand it off to Tim, who's going to talk you through more on the design side and the benefits we got from working with IMD on this one.
Thanks, Lauren. As you can see, like we talked about, the final typical section was really just a verification. Once we got the information from IMD, we had early coordination with this project with all the stakeholders. This was a bonus allocation project from Campo. In our discussions with Campo, the town of Fuquay, NCDOT, it was all, we were all in consensus, about having bike ped accommodations, as part of the project that would be funded. So it wasn't a push-pull, but, part of the process is building consensus. We can get recommendations, but we have to have buy-in from all the stakeholders really to get it implemented into our final plan. And that's what we were able to do on this project. This is just a snapshot of one of the intersections here, the most complicated, I'd say, intersection. We have Air Park Road coming in from the south, Hilltop, US 401, and Hilltop Needmore coming down from the north. As you can see, the side path there is on the south side with the sidewalk there on the north side. And because of the wider right-of-way, the dark green area there, and the curb and gutter option was the selected alternative, a lot of it fits in with minimal right-of-way, at least as far as this goes. Utilities will have to weigh in on this, and it could change slightly. But part of the other recommendations that we're going to be implementing through final design is also LPIs, high-vis crosswalks, raised medians for refuge islands, advanced stop bars, and cycle links. We are moving in towards field inspection and right-of-way, and all of these things will also be looked at as we move the project along in final design. And this is just a high-level look. This is not a final plan, but just to kind of show you the side paths you see there in gray, as well as the sidewalks, and how we're looking to navigate through the intersection, especially this one that's reversed RCI, a little bit more complicated type intersection. So I guess some of the takeaways and the benefits in the process and implementing these into your projects. For this particular project, the Town of Fuquay's pedestrian plan really was more or less an extension of Main Street, was their desire, extending it north from town, which would provide multimodal options and lower speeds with the curb and gutter selected alternative. This will allow for denser usage along the corridor for the future. I know there's developments north on Hilltop Needmore Road, and I'm sure there will be developments south as well as time goes by. And just this particular design, just providing a sustainable and equitable design for mobility for all the users. That's what our goal is, and we certainly appreciate IMD's input, as well as all of our other stakeholders, Division 5, and everyone else on the project.
Just one more thing about the Town of Fuquay's pedestrian plan. So this project doesn't go all the way down into Fuquay, so we're not connecting directly into Main Street or 401. But what it's doing is it's setting the corridor up for long-term success when it comes to a complete street. So this will be usable for what's on this corridor and in this particular project area, but long-term, when the Main Street extension of the lower speeds and the usability for multimodal users is implemented in that gap that's going to be there now, this is already implemented and it's there and it's ready to go to be a part of that complete street network. So really, I think one of my biggest takeaways, and I think I've already said it once, is making sure that the IMD review and the complete streets implementation is part of the DNA of the project, and it's not added on at the end. If you try to retrofit a mixed-use path where you thought there was a sidewalk, you're going to affect budget, you're going to affect schedule, and if things get cut for value engineering, it might be last in, first out kind of thing. So we want to make sure that we are taking a holistic look at corridors and the projects along them, so that the ultimate product at final build-out is this complete street concept and friendly to all users.
Okay, that's it.
Well, it looks like we're running early on schedule, so plenty of time for Q&A, Ryan, if you want to take this microphone off, however you want to do it. But to you to start out with. Does anyone have any questions? No? Okay. There.
You mentioned the ability to be able to see the status of those project managers. Is that live now?
It is. Yep.
Where is it at?
On the Complete Streets Connect page.
Here, Joe.
Oh, sorry. On the Complete Streets Connect page, there's a link to the dashboard. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
There's a good example, like when you've gotten to the end and the impacts or the costs were too high, could you maybe talk through an example of when you had to go back and change what was recommended and how the locals felt about that if it wasn't consistent with their plans?
Yeah, absolutely. I think probably the best example of that is really when something like a multi-use path is recommended, but the space isn't there. There's myriad of different constraints that could be there. So looking through that, what we did, I can't remember the project name because they all blend together after. But what we did there is we reassessed sort of like what the typical section looked like, what space we had, what we could fit in there. We were able to work with the berm separation a little bit, and we lost some of that, and we worked with the local community to make sure that they were okay with something being more. It wasn't completely back of curb, but it was almost back of curb essentially. So we worked through that with them, and then also there was an option for reducing down to a sidewalk and maybe having sidewalk and bike lanes as an option. The project area was amenable to that. It wasn't the best design, but you could do it essentially. But in this case, the municipality didn't want to do that, so they actually put in some cost share to make sure that we could get the multi-use path in that facility. So it kind of is case by case, depends on the municipality and the challenges that you have. But there's always, there's a way to look at and take a deep look to make things fit or, decide and know for sure that we need to go for a different facility type. Yeah, absolutely. It's a great point. So one of the resources that we're developing is the flexibility design toolkit specific for multimodal facilities. And it's going to have sort of a decision tree, if you will, of considerations to start with when you have a situation like that. Are we looking at lane widths? Are we looking at berms, medians, that sort of thing? Making sure that we've done, our due diligence on things that we can limit and decrease in size and be okay project-wise. And then working through, if you do need to make that decision for an alternative facility type, what does that mean? If you move to bike lanes from a multi-use path, different intersection elements that come into play and design elements like that related. So, all right.
Hey, Joe, what's the most common thing that you guys end up recommending during your complete streets review?
It's a great question. Paved shoulders is the most common recommendation. I think it probably is illustrative of the rural nature of our state, but that's probably the most typical facility recommendation. Yep.
Any other questions? All right. Okay. Well, thank you all for your time. Enjoy the break. Next session is at 2:30. If you didn't sign in when you came in, be sure to do that when you come out, especially if you need PDHs. Hope you have a great afternoon.